I have never quite seen a release as strange as the recently announced Vivo X50 series phones. These days you usually see 3 phones line up in a series, such as the Samsung Galaxy S20, S20 Plus and S20 Ultra. The differences you usually see in a trio lineup is minimal. They differentiate between size and cameras, but their internal hardware specs, such as the processor, remain the same. Well, that's not the case with the X50 series devices. The startup X50 comes paired with a mid-range Snapdragon 765G chipset, which makes sense. It's the cheaper option and there is no Pro behind the name. However, the X50 Pro comes with the same mid-range chip despite having the Pro title. The major difference here is the fact that the X50 Pro comes paired with a gimbal stabilization mechanism I mentioned earlier, giving it its true status as the Pro variant, no doubt. What starts to get weird though is that the true flagship, the X50 Pro Plus, completely lacks Vivo's latest smartphone gimbal innovation. This could lead one to think that the gimbal seen on the regular X50 Pro is more of a gimmick. It's as if Vivo are testing the water with the X50 Pro and leaving the feature out of their true flagship should things go south with critics about the new feature. Or maybe the larger 50 megapixel ISOCELL GN1 sensor seen in the X50 Pro Plus couldn't be tailored to the new gimbal mechanism the same way the 48 megapixel IMX598 sensor seen in the X50 Pro could. This leaves you to wonder whether the X50 Pro Plus should have even been made at all. Think about it. The X50 Pro could have been paired with a Snapdragon 865 processing chip and 120Hz display with a slight increase in the price department. This would mean their flagship of the series would include all the necessary flagship materials as well as the new gimbal. Surely this would sway flagship consumers to Vivo's new X50 Pro. The cheaper and simpler X50 starts at 3,498 Chinese yuan for the 8GB of RAM, 128GB storage version, which works out to roughly $490 and 37,000 Indian rupees. This puts it at a higher price point than the flagship killers out there such as the Realme X50 Pro and Redmi K30 Pro, which both have smartphone leading Snapdragon 865 processing chips inside them. The X50 will be available in China starting June 6th. The gimbal-centric Vivo X50 Pro bumps the starting price up to 4,298 Chinese yuan for the 8GB of RAM 128GB storage version, which works out to about $600 and 45,500 Indian rupees. You will be able to get the X50 Pro in your hand starting June 12th in China. The true flagship here, which is the X50 Pro Plus, that does indeed come with Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 865 chip, starts at 4,998 Chinese yuan for the 8GB of RAM 128GB storage version, which comes to $700 and 53,000 Indian rupees. This is actually cheaper than other flagship phones that come out with a similar spec sheet. If you want the X50 Pro Plus, you will have to wait until it goes on sale in July with no specific date set in China. That means that you will be spending around $100 more for their best phone of the series, which in take removes the reason for buying the phone in the first place, the professional gimbal camera system, but then again adds a flagship processor at that cost. It is just disappointing to see that you have to decide what matters more. If you do decide to pull the trigger on one of them though, you will be delighted to know that these will be Vivo's first X series devices to launch globally. Unfortunately, there is no mention on when. So what differentiates all 3 devices here? Well, for starters, the body of the X50 Pro and Pro Plus are identical. They are the same height, width, thickness, and weight. However, the vanilla X50 is taller, wider, thinner, and lighter. All 3 devices come paired with a 6.56-inch AMOLED display. What is different here though is that only the Pro and Pro Plus models come with curved displays, which I personally prefer, but majority still lean toward flat displays such as seen on the regular X50. The X50 and X50 Pro both have 90Hz refresh rate panels with 180Hz touch response rates, while the X50 Pro Plus comes with a 120Hz refresh rate display with 240 touch response rates. This puts it in line with other flagships such as the OnePlus 8 Pro, Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, and Oppo Find X2 Pro. However, it falls short in the resolution scale race, leaving it with just Full HD Plus instead of QHD Plus, which is packed into all the devices just mentioned. All 3 phones come with a single hole punch for the selfie camera as well as HDR10 Plus, which is always nice to see. When it comes to raw power, all 3 phones can be bought with 8GB of LPDDR4X RAM and 128GB of UFS 2 storage. However, only the Pro and Pro Plus models come paired with UFS 2.1 storage, leaving the regular X50 with standard UFS 2.0 storage. But even UFS 2.1 falls short of most 2020 flagships, which are fitted with UFS 3.1 storage. Only the X50 Pro gets a 12GB of RAM version at this point in time, but even then still sticks to LPDDR4X RAM, even though the standard for flagships these days is LPDDR5 RAM. The max storage capacity on all three phones is 256 gigs, with no option for expandable storage, and if you would like the Pro Plus model with its 12GB RAM 256 gig storage option, you're going to have to spend around $850, putting it up there with the OnePlus 8 Pro price, which I feel is a better buy considering it has an IP certification and wireless charging, both of which are absent on all X50 series devices. Speaking of charging, the X50 and X50 Pro come with a maximum charge rate of 33 watts, while the X50 Pro Plus comes with 44 watt charging, which still falls short of the 55 watt charging Vivo are capable of as seen in the iQOO 3. This shouldn't be a big issue though, since the battery capacities of all three phones are nothing to write home about. The X50 comes with a 4200 mAh cell, while the X50 Pro and X50 Pro Plus both come paired with a 4315 mAh battery. Not the biggest batteries around, and if you want to enable their high refresh rate panels, they will probably not last very long, which leads to a possible reason why QHD Plus panels were not used here. However, all phones are using efficient 7nm chipset technology, which should help in the battery department. The X50 and X50 Pro come paired with a mid-range 7nm 5G chipset, the Snapdragon 765G, while the X50 Pro Plus is the only one to sport the leading 7nm Plus flagship Snapdragon 865 processor. In this regard, the X50 Pro Plus seems like a bit of a no-brainer. However, you will be missing out on the gimbal, which is an X50 Pro exclusive. On that note, let's dive into the main selling points of the X50 trio, the cameras. All three come with the same 32 megapixel punch hole selfie camera with 1080p 30fps recording, and more importantly, quad camera setups at the back, but differentiate in meaningful ways to justify their price points. All three phones share the same 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens with 120 degrees field of view, as well as the same 13 megapixel telephoto portrait camera with 2x optical zoom. While the X50 Pro and X50 Pro Plus share the same 8 megapixel periscope telephoto lens with 5x optical zoom, 60x hyper zoom, and optical image stabilization, the vanilla X50 comes with a cheaper 5 megapixel macro sensor instead. The X50 Pro and X50 Pro Plus still have a macro mode, however, they use the ultra-wide sensor for this feature. All of these devices sport optical image stabilization in